Rachel sat in her dimly lit living room, the weight of the world pressing against her chest. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, but sleep felt like a luxury she hadn't known in years. Her apartment was small, just 2 rooms with thin walls that carried every sound from the noisy neighbors. The paint was peeling, the heater groaned more than it worked, and the fridge buzzed like it was gasping for life. On the coffee table in front of her sat a stack of bills. Rent, electricity, water, groceries. Each envelope screamed the same thing: overdue. Her hands trembled as she shuffled through them, her heart pounding harder with every slip of paper. In the room next door, 5-year-old Ethan lay curled up on a thin mattress, his small arms wrapped tightly around his old stuffed bear. Its button eye was missing, its fur worn thin, but to Ethan it was priceless. Rachel peeked in on him through the half-open door, her tired eyes softening at the sight. His chest rose and fell peacefully, untouched by the storm that raged in her mind. For him, she told herself. Every shift, every sleepless night, every tear she swallowed, she bore it all for him. But tonight, something inside her felt like it was breaking. She had just discovered a notice taped to her front door: eviction in 10 days if payment is not received. 10 days. She couldn't even scrape together enough for groceries, let alone rent. Rachel sank back onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. Her husband had walked out 2 years ago, leaving her with nothing but debt and a child to raise. He had promised to send support, but the promises turned into excuses, and the excuses turned into silence. Since then, she had been surviving on scraps, working mornings as a cleaner in an office building, evenings as a waitress at a diner. Some nights, she barely saw Ethan awake. She tried to keep her head above water, but now the tide had pulled too strong. Her phone sat on the table beside the bills, its cracked screen glowing faintly. She picked it up, staring at her sister's name in her contacts. They hadn't spoken much since Rachel's struggles began. Pride had kept her from asking for help, but tonight, pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her fingers shook as she typed. Please, I don't know what else to do. Ethan and I are about to lose everything. I don't care about myself anymore, but I can't let him starve. Please, help me. Tears blurred her vision as she pressed send. Her heart ached, knowing she had exposed her desperation, but what choice did she have? For Ethan, she would beg if she had to. She set the phone down, wiping her face, and whispered into the silence, I just need one chance. Just one. But Rachel didn't realize her exhaustion had betrayed her. In her rush, she hadn't sent the message to her sister. She had sent it to the wrong number. Miles away, in a penthouse that overlooked the glittering skyline of the city, a man named Alexander Grant sat alone at a sleek, polished table. The clock on his wall ticked past midnight as well, but unlike Rachel, sleep didn't elude him out of fear. For Alex, it was emptiness. At 42, he was one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs. He had built an empire from scratch: real estate, tech investments, luxury hotels. His name was in magazines, his face on business covers, his wealth envied by millions. Yet for all the success, his nights were quiet, his apartment cold, and his heart heavier than he let the world see. His phone buzzed. He sighed, expecting another meaningless email from an associate in another time zone. But when he unlocked the screen, his breath caught. Please, I don't know what else to do. Ethan and I are about to lose everything. I don't care about myself anymore, but I can't let him starve. Please, help me. The message wasn't for him. That much was clear, but he couldn't look away from the words. He read them again, slower this time, as if tasting every ounce of pain hidden between the lines. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the city lights outside his window. He had spent years chasing numbers, profits, investments, expansions. But none of those numbers had ever stirred something inside him the way this single, desperate message did. For the first time in years, he felt a tug in his chest. The kind of tug that reminded him of his own mother, a woman who had worked herself to the bone after his father abandoned them. He remembered nights when she went hungry so he could eat. He remembered the fear in her eyes when the rent was due. He knew those words Rachel had written. He had lived them once. Instead of deleting the message, he typed back. I think you sent this to the wrong number. But, are you okay? Back in her small apartment, Rachel stirred from her restless doze when her phone buzzed. She blinked at the screen, and her heart sank when she realized her mistake. The message hadn't gone to her sister. She had poured her soul out to a complete stranger. She quickly typed a reply, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bother you. Please just ignore this." Her cheeks burned with shame. She wanted to throw the phone across the room. How could she be so careless? But almost instantly, another message appeared. Sometimes the wrong message reaches the right person. Rachel froze. She read the words over and over, her mind spinning. What did that even mean? Who was this person? And why did their words feel different? She didn't respond. She couldn't. She was too embarrassed, too weary. She set the phone aside and curled up on the couch, trying to push the moment out of her mind. 3 days passed. Rachel pushed herself through shifts, through exhaustion, through the ache in her body. Ethan smiled at her like he always did, unaware of how close their lives were to crumbling. And then, on the third evening, as she carried Ethan home from the diner, his head resting on her shoulder, his little arms clutching the worn-out bear, she heard a knock at her door. Her heart skipped. No one visited her. No one ever knocked. Carefully, she set Ethan down in his room and tiptoed to the door. She opened it slowly, and her breath caught. A tall man stood there, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of wealth, but his eyes weren't cold, they were kind, steady, almost searching. "I'm Alexander Grant," he said softly, his voice calm but firm. "You don't know me, but I got your message. And I'm here because I couldn't ignore it." Rachel's pulse raced. She wanted to slam the door shut, to tell him he had the wrong place, to protect herself from whatever this was. But there was something in his face that made her pause, not pity, not arrogance, but sincerity. "Why would you come here?" she whispered, her voice barely holding steady. "Because no mother should ever have to beg for her child's survival," Alex replied gently. "And because sometimes, strangers are exactly who we need." Rachel stood frozen, her world tilting, her breath caught between fear and hope. And in that moment, she had no idea her life was about to change forever. The silence between Rachel and Alex stretched after his words. She stood frozen in the doorway, clutching the edge as if it were the only thing holding her up. For years, she had taught herself not to trust easily, not landlords, not employers, not even family who had drifted away when life grew messy. And now here was a stranger, a millionaire no less, telling her he had come because he couldn't ignore her pain. She wanted to send him away. To protect her pride. To protect Ethan. Yet something in his eyes, the weight of sincerity, the absence of judgment, kept her from shutting the door. Against every instinct screaming in her head, she stepped aside. "You can come in," she murmured. Alex entered quietly, his polished shoes echoing softly against the worn floorboards. His gaze swept the room, not with disdain, but with a kind of heavy observation. The peeling wallpaper, the couch patched with an old sheet, the stack of bills left carelessly on the coffee table. His attention lingered on the fridge, which hummed faintly, and then drifted to the small drawings taped to the wall, uneven stick figures with bright crayons, labeled Mom and Ethan. "You have an artist here," he said, almost smiling. Rachel followed his gaze and shrugged, her voice hushed. He likes to draw." Alex nodded. "That's more than liking. That's talent waiting for someone to see it." Rachel looked down, fighting the lump in her throat. Compliments weren't something she was used to, at least not genuine ones. She motioned for him to sit, though part of her still wondered if this was all a mistake, if letting him in would only make her problems worse. As they sat opposite each other, Rachel folded her arms protectively. "Look, Mr. Grant, I don't know why you're here. I didn't ask you to come." He leaned forward slightly, resting his hands together. "You're right. You didn't. But sometimes we don't ask for the help we desperately need. I know what it's like to be where you are, well, not exactly. But I know the fear of not knowing if tomorrow will crush you." Rachel frowned, skeptical. You live in skyscrapers. You don't know this life." Alex held her gaze. "I grew up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs. I watched her cry at night when she thought I was asleep. I promised myself one day I'd change things for her. I built everything I have from that promise. But she died before she could ever enjoy it." His voice lowered. "And I've been searching for what all of this means ever since." For a moment, Rachel saw something raw in him, loneliness disguised behind wealth. The air between them shifted. That night, Alex didn't offer her money. He didn't insult her pride by pulling out a checkbook. Instead, he asked her to talk. And Rachel, though hesitant, found herself telling him pieces of her story, about the husband who had abandoned them, about the double shifts, about her constant fear of failing Ethan. "I just don't want him to grow up thinking he's not enough," she whispered, her voice cracking. "That everything he doesn't have means he's less than other kids." Alex felt a tightness in his throat. He thought of his own childhood, of wearing hand-me-down shoes, of skipping meals. He reached across the table, not to touch her hand, but to place his palm flat as if grounding his words. "You've already given him the most important thing," he said. "Love. Do you know how many people grow up in mansions but never feel loved?" Her eyes glistened, but she quickly turned her face away, embarrassed. The next morning, Alex left quietly. But Rachel would soon learn that his presence was not a fleeting gesture of pity. Within a week, an envelope arrived at her door. Nervously, she opened it, expecting perhaps a bill collector's notice. Instead, inside was a set of documents. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Grant Foundation for Single Mothers." Her breath caught as she read further. Her debts had been legally cleared. Her rent had been prepaid for 12 months. And attached was a handwritten letter. "Rachel, this isn't charity. It's a foundation, one I'm starting in your name, for mothers like you who fight every day but just need one break. You're the first. Consider this not a handout, but a hand up. Alex." Rachel sank onto the couch, the letter trembling in her hands. Relief washed over her in waves, but so did disbelief. Why would a man she barely knew do this? Why would he tie her name to something so permanent, so powerful? She wanted to call him, to refuse, to insist she couldn't accept. But when Ethan came running into the room, clutching his crayon, and asked, "Mommy, can I draw you today?" she realized this wasn't just about her pride anymore. This was about giving her son a future free from fear. From then on, Alex's visits became more frequent. At first, Rachel bristled, certain he would try to control her life. But he never did. He asked questions instead. He helped her explore better job opportunities, connecting her with a role at a local community center where she could use her skills without sacrificing time with Ethan. He noticed Ethan's love for drawing and brought him a small set of paints and canvases. Rachel watched as Ethan's face lit up brighter than she had seen in years. The boy who had once only had a worn stuffed bear now had colors to paint his dreams. Slowly, Rachel's life shifted. Not because Alex gave her everything, but because he gave her a foundation, literally and figuratively, on which to build again. Yet what shocked her most wasn't the opportunities. It was Alex himself. Despite his wealth, he never flaunted it. When he visited, he would sit on the same old couch, drinking instant coffee without complaint. He listened when she spoke. He laughed with Ethan as if he were family. And sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, Rachel caught glimpses of a man who carried his own invisible wounds. One evening, as the sun set and painted the apartment in golden light, Rachel turned to him. "Why me?" she asked softly. "Why did you care when you could have just deleted that message?" Alex paused. His gaze drifted to Ethan, who was on the floor painting, his little hands smudged with color. Then he looked back at Rachel, his eyes raw with honesty. "Because I know what it's like to need someone and have no one come," he said quietly. "I couldn't let that happen again, not to you, not to him." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. But this time, they weren't from despair. They were from gratitude, from hope. That wrong message, sent in desperation, had reached the right man. And for Rachel, what began as a mistake became the turning point of her life. For Alex, the man who had everything but still felt empty, it became something even greater. He realized that wealth wasn't meant to be hoarded or measured in numbers. The greatest wealth was in what you gave away, especially when it changed the course of someone else's story. As the days turned into months, the bond between Rachel, Ethan, and Alex deepened. They were no longer strangers. They were proof that sometimes the most powerful connections are born not of plans, but of accidents. And in that small apartment, with crayon drawings on the wall and laughter echoing through the rooms, Alex discovered something he hadn't felt in years. Home.